They think the most dangerous fire is the one inside a burning house. They were wrong. The most dangerous fire is when your own son stands in the middle of a crowd and calls another man his father. I have put out hundreds of fires in Tacoma. I have pulled people out of flames, out of smoke, out of collapsing beams. But I never expected to be burned by a gift worth $65,000 for a father-in-law and an $18 watch for the man who raised him. If you have ever been dismissed, ever been pushed down to the rank of a stranger in your own family, stay until the end of this story, because this is not just revenge. This is justice from a father who has walked through fire and no longer fears burns. And before we begin, thank you for your time, for listening, and for still believing that the truth, no matter how painful, deserves to be brought into the light. Leave a dot so I know you are here, and that in this world there are still people who understand the value of gratitude. I always thought I was used to noise. 32 years in the Tacoma Fire Department are enough for anyone to grow familiar with sirens, shouting, and the crackling of wood under black smoke. Yet on that Father's Day morning, standing in the center of downtown, surrounded by more than 200 people, laughing and talking, I felt more suffocated than in any burning house I had ever entered. Downtown Tacoma blazed with flags and balloons. Red, white, and blue ribbons hung along the lampposts. The smell of grilled sausages, popcorn, and coffee mixing with the salty breeze from Commencement Bay. On the street, the parade lined up. The high school marching band, the Veterans Association, a roaring group of Harley riders, and, like every year, a fire truck gleaming red, its ladder extended, its lights spinning even though there was no fire today. I held my old fire helmet in my hand, the one marked with 214, the station number that had followed me for half a lifetime. The red paint had faded. A burn mark darkened one side, and the leather inside still carried a faint smell of smoke, the kind that clings to clothes, hair, and skin through years of night shifts. In my other hand, I held a small carton box wrapped in brown paper. The butter waffles Lily loves. She calls me Grandpa Ray, and every year she says, "It's not Father's Day if you don't bring waffles." I know that at 13 she is starting to feel embarrassed by childish sweets, but she still finishes half the box every time I bring them. That is the only reason I agreed to attend the parade this year. Not for an award, not for the honorary seat, but because of Lily's message last night. "Grandpa, make sure you come." She said she wanted to sit next to me on the sidewalk like we used to. At the main intersection, the organizers had set up a small stage. I saw Evan standing on it from a distance. He wore a white shirt, a navy vest, a gray tie, holding a microphone in one hand, while the other waved around with the phone he was using to live stream. In front of the stage hung a large banner. "Father's Day Community Parade, honoring our heroes," something like that. My name was printed somewhere in the program the young woman at the information booth had given me. Captain Raymond Lawson, Tacoma Fire Department, retired. I folded the paper, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and tried to ignore the mix of pride and displacement tightening in my chest. Ever since my wife passed, no Father's Day had made me feel anything other than like an extra in my own life. "Dad!" Lily's voice came from behind me just before her small hand wrapped around my elbow. I turned and saw her in a gray hoodie, hair tied in a hurry, eyes brighter than the sunlight. "You got here early," she said, then glanced at the box in my hand. "Waffles again?" "You said it's a yearly requirement," I smiled. "I wouldn't dare disobey." She scrunched her nose, then tugged me toward the row of folding chairs under the stage. The speakers crackled to life. The MC began the introductions, and the drums from the marching band echoed from afar like the heartbeat of the whole city. I was familiar with ceremonies like this. Dull speeches, a few handshakes, a wooden plaque to hang on a wall. I expected nothing more. To me, Father's Day had always been just another date, except once when Evan was 5, and he gave me a white sheet of paper with a crooked drawing of a man in a fire helmet and the words, "My hero." I had kept that paper in my drawer for decades. Now there he stood on the stage, phone raised, face turned toward the cheering crowd, his chin lifted, his smile wide, the kind that belongs to someone who knows how to command a room and the attention inside it. "Evan looks busy," I murmured. Lily tightened her grip on my arm. "Dad's doing a special segment for Grandpa Richard," she whispered. "I only found out this morning." I didn't have time to ask more before the MC called Carter Construction, then called Richard Carter, Evan's father-in-law, to the stage. A brand new Ford F-150 Tremor, painted charcoal gray with sharp LED lights, rolled slowly in front of the stage like a gleaming beast. The crowd gasped. I heard someone behind me whisper, "Beautiful. Must be expensive." My eyes moved from the truck to Evan. For a moment, I thought he might glance toward the seats where I sat. He didn't. He turned his back to me, facing the phone's camera instead. "Everyone," Evan said, his voice booming through the speakers, confident and crisp. "Today isn't just Father's Day. Today is the day I honor the man who taught me everything about being a man, about business, about building a future." He turned to Richard, a neatly groomed silver-haired man with a soft belly, a perfectly tailored suit, and the familiar smile of someone who always has a contract ready to sign. "Richard Carter has been the father I never had." That sentence dropped into the square like a match into a gasoline drum. The crowd applauded. A few people whistled. Someone yelled, "Woo!" from the group of young guys holding paper beer cups. Evan's phone stayed lifted, capturing everything. I heard Lily suck in a breath beside me, as if someone had shoved her hard in the chest. I didn't feel my heart hurt. Honestly, after all these years, I thought I was immune. But my chest grew heavy, and my right hand, the one that had carried countless bodies out of burning homes, trembled enough for the 214 helmet to shake. Evan pulled a shiny key fob from his pocket and raised it, the Tacoma sunlight flashing off it like a thin blade. "This is our gift to you from Melissa and me, a brand new Ford F-150 Tremor." He pressed the button, and the truck chirped loudly. "You deserve this." The crowd erupted again. Richard placed a hand dramatically on his chest, pretending to be moved, then hugged Evan right in front of the camera. I sat right there, less than 10 meters from the stage, still holding the waffle box on my lap. Part of my mind, the part that had learned to stay calm between fire and smoke, was trying to analyze the situation. This was a show, a stage, a family marketing moment. But the other part, the part that still remembered Evan's small hand clinging to my neck after every nightmare when he first lost his mother, saw only one bare truth. My son had just declared to the entire city that he had never had a father. Someone behind me whispered, "So who's that old silver-haired man sitting there?" Another voice replied, half joking, half real, "Probably an uncle." I did not turn around. I kept my eyes fixed on Evan's face, waiting to see if he would look down for even a moment, recognize me, correct his words. He didn't. He kept holding the microphone, kept smiling, kept delivering those polished lines. "Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Tacoma community. Carter Construction is always here for you." When the cheering finally softened, Evan lowered his phone. He turned, scanning the crowd. I saw a flicker of hesitation, or maybe I imagined it, before he stepped down from the stage and walked straight toward me. Lily let go of my arm and shifted slightly, as if preparing for the Father's Day hug she believed was coming. Evan stopped in front of the row. "Dad," he said, wearing the smile I knew too well. The smile of a man who just closed a lucrative deal and was now free to handle the leftovers. "You made it." I nodded, unsure my voice would stay steady if I spoke. He didn't hug me. He simply pulled a small paper bag from his vest pocket, crumpled from being stuffed beside his wallet and keys. "I got something for you," he said, handing the bag over the chairs. "Just a little symbolic gift. You don't like expensive stuff anyway, right?" I took the bag. It felt so light that it was almost empty. Lily stared, eyes wide. I opened the top, pulled out a clear plastic box, a black plastic watch, oversized face, glow-in-the-dark hands. The price sticker still stuck to the corner, $18.99. Someone nearby snickered. Probably got it from the Walmart clearance rack. Another whispered, "Looks cheap as hell." I felt the blood rush to my face, but after all those years in front of live flames, my skin had grown too thick to burn easily. It only warmed, not ignited. I carefully peeled off the price sticker so it wouldn't fall to the ground. The tiny paper clung to my calloused fingertip. At that moment, Lily whispered, so softly only I could hear it, "Grandpa deserves more." 4 simple words, but they rang in my ears louder than any fire engine siren. Evan didn't seem to hear. He was already turned back toward Richard, where his friends were crowding around the new truck, laughing, snapping photos, recording more stories. Melissa was recording another video. "Surprising my dad with his dream truck on Father's Day." I looked at the watch in my hand, then at the 214 helmet on my lap. One side was something that had been with me since the very beginning, covered in smoke, water, and mud, yet never once betraying me. The other side was something brand new, light, nameless, replaceable at any moment. I was no longer sure whether I was thinking about the watch or about my role in my son's life. People kept gathering around the Ford. Someone called out, "Evan, say a few words for the local news." He laughed, ran over, and stood beside his father-in-law, his hand resting on the glossy hood as if it were his own accomplishment. Lily stayed quiet beside me for a while, then whispered, "Grandpa, can we go home now?" I looked down at my granddaughter. Her eyes were slightly red, but lifted high, exactly like Evan's eyes when he was 8, and I made him walk across that rusty suspension bridge for the first time. I gently placed the watch back into the paper bag, sliding the peeled price sticker inside as if every piece of evidence needed to be preserved. I stood up, adjusted the 214 helmet in my hand, and tucked the waffle box under my arm. "Yes," I said, "let's go." "But what about my dad?" she asked softly. I looked toward the stage one last time. Evan was smiling into the camera, hand raised, thanking the entire world except one person. "Your dad is busy being a hero," I said, forcing my mouth into a straight line that almost resembled a smile. "Let Grandpa do what he needs to do." We walked through the crowd, blending into the music, the laughter, the speakers. No one stopped me. No one called my name. No one asked for a picture with former Captain Ray Lawson. I was used to that. Being invisible in a city I had saved more times than I could count. But that day, something else shifted quietly. With burning houses, I knew the rule. If the fire has reached the rafters, you are not allowed to go inside. Maybe the heart should have a rule like that, too. As Lily and I turned onto the small street leading to the parking lot, the noise behind us faded like the distant echo of a fire already extinguished. I tightened my grip on the paper bag, feeling the edge of the watchbox press into my palm. In my mind, another image appeared. The wooden cabinet in my office where I kept every receipt, every document, every wrinkled scrap from a lifetime of being a father. Some fires look extinguished on the outside, but smolder deep inside, eating through the wooden core. Only when the ceiling collapses do people realize it. That Father's Day, beneath the applause for Richard Carter's new truck, I understood one thing. The house called family had been burning for a long time. And when an old firefighter finally realizes that, he does not run inside to save what he chose to burn. He goes home, opens the cabinet, and sees exactly how much gasoline he poured into it himself. I got home just as the Tacoma afternoon sun tilted across the old houses on South Orchard Street. The golden light settled on the pine steps. My wife used to say, "Ray, let's repaint these this weekend." I kept that old color for 10 years, not because I liked it, but because I never dared to change anything in the house she last walked through. I took off my dusty shoes, set my fire helmet on the table, and stood still for a long moment, in the silent living room. This house had always been quiet, but today the silence felt different, thicker, heavier, like the air inside a house after a fire has been extinguished, still carrying a faint smell of something smoldering that no one pays attention to. I set the paper bag and the cheap watch on the table. It lay there, sunlight hitting the plastic face, gleaming in the way only cheap things gleam. I turned away before my heart could sink any further. My hand instinctively touched the lock on the wooden cabinet in the corner, the keepsake cabinet from Fire Station 12. The door opened and the old scent of leather, smoke, and time drifted out like a thin wave. Inside were my wife Margaret's badge. She had been a paramedic on our team, the woman I met during a wood store fire in 1989. I held the badge in my palm, the metal so cold it made me shiver. She died 13 years ago when Evan was 26. He cried a lot. I didn't, not because I was strong, but because I was numb. A good firefighter knows how to compartmentalize, divide pain into boxes and lock them away. The problem is that sometimes you lock them for so long that you forget where the keys are. A picture of Evan at 5, wearing a fleece firefighter costume, standing beside the toy truck built from pine wood. He grinned widely, missing teeth, holding an oversized red helmet. Dad, I want to grow up to be like you, save people, and drive a truck with flashing lights. That sentence played in my head more times than I could count. A thick binder documenting 32 years of firefighting, every page marked with my handwriting. Every page carried the smell of smoke, hose water, sweat, and the adrenaline of nights spent running into burning houses. But what choked me the most wasn't the events on the paper. It was the fact that Evan no longer remembered or no longer cared about any of it. I closed the cabinet, then walked to the small office at the end of the hall. Neatly arranged on the shelf were boxes labeled in marker. Evan School, Evan Loans, Evan Medical, Evan House. I had kept everything. My son never knew, or knew but treated it as something obvious. I pulled down the box labeled Evan Expenses and set it on the desk. Every time I opened a box like that, it felt like opening the door to a burnt-out house, never knowing what I would find, only knowing there would be ash. Inside were college tuition receipts, $38,400. Wedding loan when Evan married Melissa, $12,000. Down payment for his first house, $65,000. 2 emergency visits after motorcycle accidents, $32,700. Dental bills after the stair fall, $9,800. 8 months of mortgage when Evan was unemployed, $70,000. Small miscellaneous costs, tools, moving, fees, car repairs. I sat and calculated for the first time in many years. The final number appeared on the blank sheet. $250,000. $250,000. That wasn't just money. That was $250,000 of my youth, of freezing 3, shifts, of collapsing ladders, of coughing smoke until I threw up blood, of all the cold dinners I abandoned because I was dispatched to another call. I put a hand on my forehead and leaned back in the chair. The last light of the day hit the window, shining on the receipts, like ashes falling from a roof after a fire. A small breeze slipped through the door crack, carrying the scent of pine, and suddenly, like someone replayed an old film reel, I saw myself in front of a burning garage. The neighbor's garage had caught fire at 2 in the afternoon on a July day. I wasn't on shift, but I heard the screams while fixing the fence. Evan, only 10 at the time, had run too close, far beyond what was safe. A sheet of burning metal fell right in front of him. I don't remember how fast I moved. I only remember the smell of melting plastic, the popping of paint cans in the garage, and Evan's choking cough. I grabbed him, covered his head with my bare hand, and ran away from the fire. When we reached safety, Evan clung to my neck, face trembling but trying to be brave. Dad, I'm not scared. I knew you'd save me. I used to think that moment was a lifelong promise between us. Now, remembering it, my heart tightened the same way it did when hearing the steel beams crack inside an old burning house, the sound that warns something terrible is coming. I opened my eyes again, the room now sinking into the deep shadows of evening. The paper reading $250,000 was still on the desk. The $18 watch lay beside it, so cheap even the warm lamplight didn't want to reflect on it. Between those two numbers, 250,000 and 18, lay the entire distance between me and my son. I closed my eyes and whispered a sentence I never thought I would say out loud. I've taught so many people how to survive fire, but I couldn't save my own son from his own greed. The room was utterly silent. Only the ticking of the wall clock moved, cold like drops of water falling after a fire. I packed up the box, placed the cheap watch on top, and gently closed the lid. And at that exact moment, I knew. The day I allowed Evan the power to hurt me had ended. A fire can be put out with water, but betrayal, to extinguish that, you need cold clarity, and I was ready to walk into the real smoke. That night, Tacoma dropped to a temperature lower than usual. Wind from the bay slipped through the window cracks, making a thin, cold sound like metal contracting after a fire. I sat at my desk, surrounded by Evan's receipts and keepsakes, but it felt as if I were standing inside the hazy smoke of a collapsing house. The path looked clear, yet every breath caught at the back of my throat. I opened my old laptop, the one I had used during my final years in the fire department when they moved me to safety reports, and logged into the joint bank account Evan had suggested we set up 3 years ago. So it's easier when you need to pay bills, Dad. I'd never liked linking finances like that, but he was my son. No one guards themselves from a flame that comes from their own kitchen. The transaction list appeared, and within a minute, I knew something was wrong. The 3 most recent transfers, $5,200, $7,900, $11,400. All 3 listed the same memo: Safety Inspection Advance. Recipient: Carter Construction, LLC. I frowned. Carter Construction, Evan's father-in-law's company, had not hired me in over a year. The last time they did, it was only for a storage safety check, and Evan had come along to learn more. Yet here, large sums of money were being sent out regularly, weeks apart. I opened every transaction, checked dates, and checked account numbers. No mistake. This wasn't a system glitch. Someone had done this on purpose. A firefighter can spot where smoke rises, but to know where the fire starts, you have to place your hand on the wall and feel the heat. I scrolled to the joint account history. Many transactions under Evan's name. Many others were unlabeled but made from devices I knew were not mine. A cold prickled up my neck the way it does when you stand before a metal door that's too hot, the sign that a room behind it is burning. Staring at the numbers 5,200, 7,900, 11,400, I remembered a sentence Evan said when he was 16, right after I hauled him out of a ditch from that motorcycle slide. Dad, I promise you, you'll never have to worry about me again. Some promises burn to ashes the day they are spoken. I inhaled deeply and opened my phone notes. I began typing: Carter Construction, suspicious transactions, safety inspection advance, check contract history. My hands trembled slightly with each word, but in my mind, one truth grew clearer. Where there is smoke, there is fire. I picked up the landline and dialed Angela Brooks, an attorney I knew from a workshop on protecting seniors from financial exploitation, a topic I once believed I'd never need. Angela's voice came through, firm and steady. I'm here, Uncle Ray. I explained everything in 3 minutes. No emotions, no rambling, just facts. Former firefighters are trained to report in structure. She fell silent for a few seconds. Then Angela asked, Uncle Ray, Is Carter Construction working with your safety consulting company in any way? Not at all. Then this is a clear violation. Email me the statements immediately. I also need to see something else, especially the annex Evan had you sign last year. My stomach dropped. You mean the fire safety update? Angela exhaled softly, enough for me to know she had expected something bad. I saw that annex in the file Evan submitted when applying to expand his company. Uncle Ray. That annex is not a fire safety update. It's an operating agreement annex, a corporate authority amendment. And in that annex, your ownership rights were reduced. Evan and his father-in-law were granted increased signing authority. I shot to my feet. The chair slid back and hit the cabinet. The air in the room thickened instantly. I asked slowly, each word heavy. You mean he disguised the annex? Yes. Evan likely presented it as a safety update so you wouldn't read it closely. My skin prickled, the same sensation as when a fan blows smoke directly into your face in a burning room. Angela continued. If you signed under misrepresentation, being deceived about the content, the annex is entirely void. Washington law is very strict on elder exploitation, especially once you're over 65. I gripped the phone. The word elder stung a little. I didn't like being considered old, but in this moment I was grateful the law protected people who had lived long enough to trust the wrong ones. Angela lowered her voice, calm but unyielding. Uncle Ray, I need you to stay steady. This isn't a full blaze yet, but it's smoldering. If you don't act now, it will spread into the rest of your life. I stared at the laptop screen, where the 3 transactions glowed like burn marks. 5,200, 7,900, 11,400. 3 ignition points are crawling toward the rafters. What's the next step? I asked. Send me everything. After that, Uncle Ray, I think it's time for you to stop standing on the hose line. Angela paused, then spoke the sentence colder than the Tacoma Bay wind seeping through my window. It's time for you to stand on the investigation side. I set the phone down. In that moment, I was no longer in my small home office. I was standing on the 3rd floor of a burning structure, where flames were eating into the beams, and the snapping sounds warned of collapse. But this time was different. I wasn't running in to rescue anyone. I was preparing to step in, to find who lit the match, and that was the beginning of everything. I have never liked the feeling of gathering ashes after a fire. That job is sad. Sometimes you dig up a half-burned picture frame, sometimes a broken spoon, sometimes just a pile of ashes no one wants to look at again. But it is always the step you must take if you want to know where the fire began. That night, in the small garage behind my house, Andrew, the son of my sister, and I started doing something similar, gathering ashes. Not ashes from real fire, but ashes from trust that had been quietly burned. My garage is small, low-ceilinged, dim yellow lights, the smell of motor oil mixed with damp pine wood. This used to be the place where I taught Evan to fix a bike, change oil, and use a hammer the right way. But it was also where I stood alone for years after Linda died, the place I kept things I never had the heart to throw away. Tonight, the garage glowed with a different kind of light, the red blink from the alarm device I had installed, in case anything went wrong while repairing machines. That red light shone on me and Andrew like a warning. This would not be gentle work. Andrew stood beside me with gloved hands, a laptop on the wooden table. He is 28, works in data analysis at the Tacoma City Planning Department, a job that demands patience and a cold mind. His hair is short, his eyes sharper than his father's ever were. He looked at me and spoke in a calm voice I didn't expect. Are you ready, Uncle Ray? I nodded. I worked fires for 32 years, Andrew. Gathering ash. I'm used to it. Andrew smiled faintly, but the smile died quickly when I opened the file box on the table. I pulled out the first set of documents, the safety partnership agreement Evan told me to sign last year. At the time, he said, Dad, this is a new update from the department, which helps us get permits more easily. I didn't doubt him. I signed it right here in this garage, the moment he handed it over. Now, under that blinking red light, my signature sat beside Evan's and beside Richard Carter's. Andrew frowned. Uncle, do you know what this contract actually is? Angela said it's an ownership annex, but I haven't dared open the whole thing. Andrew slid his finger across the screen, opening the original PDF Evan had uploaded to the company cloud. He zoomed in on Clause 5, reallocation of ownership and voting rights. The next line, senior partner may delegate voting authority to junior partner or authorized advisor. The one assigned as junior partner, Evan. The one assigned as authorized advisor, Richard Carter. Something twisted deep in my chest. I have always hated the word delegation, because in the fire department, everything must be clear. The person on the hose is the person on the hose. The one entering the structure is the one entering the structure. No one changes roles on their own. And yet, my son had let someone else sign in on my behalf in my own life. Andrew scanned each page, then shook his head. Signing this basically handed your company's control to Evan and Mr. Carter. I swallowed. He told me it was a safety update. I believed him. Andrew didn't blame me. He just placed his hand gently on the papers and said quietly, "Believing the wrong person is not your fault." Those words, spoken with the honest voice of the kid I once carried when he was only months old, softened something inside me. Only a little. We moved to the second set, the internal partnership contract between my consulting company and Carter Construction. The signature line appeared again under the red light. I read it over and over, hoping I was mistaken. Evan's signature, Richard's signature, and yes, mine. But I remembered clearly, I had never signed this. Andrew set the contract down and exhaled slowly. This signature was scanned, Uncle Ray. Look here. The corner of the R is smudged, like someone lifted it from another document and layered it on. I held the page closer to the light. My heart thudded slowly, heavily. I had once smelled burning wood within seconds. Now I was smelling something else. Betrayal, well prepared and intentional. Andrew opened the email folder Angela sent. He clicked on one message from the internal exchange between Evan and Richard. Subject, RE Inspection Contract Logistics. Content, Dad never checks anything. We can use his credibility. Evan, I sat silently. It had been a long time since I felt that kind of breathlessness, not the breathlessness from smoke that I could handle. This was different, realizing my son had used my 32 years of firefighting credibility like a bargaining chip. Andrew placed a hand gently on my shoulder. Uncle, we need a little air. I nodded and took a slow walk around the garage. The blinking red light reflected on my face, on the wall, then onto the small window pane. It felt like a false alarm drill, but also very real, because the truth was my family was burning. We moved on to the final piece of evidence, the cabin camera on Fox Island. Evan once asked me for the password to help you check things when you're not there, Dad. It sounded reasonable then. But Andrew opened the log in history. Uncle, Evan used the cabin camera as his personal office. He held 14 meetings with Carter Construction from your cabin. 3 of those were on the days you had medical appointments. The image of the cabin, the place where Linda and I roasted marshmallows for Evan, where we fished in winter, now turned into the backdrop for my son to discuss using my name to sign contracts. I placed both hands on the table, lowering my head. The red alarm light reflected onto my face in the small mirror hanging in the corner. A face older than its age, wearier than after my first 24-hour shift at 26. I stared straight into that red glow, the glow that had saved countless lives in my career. Now it shone onto me, warning that I was the one who needed saving. Andrew sat down and opened Scan Pro. Let me scan everything, Uncle. It has to be legal, page by page, Proper for court submission. We won't miss anything. I watched the green scan light move across the papers, each detail of the forged signature, each line of email like a glowing ember. The garage no longer smelled of engine oil. It smelled of truth unearthed. Andrew finished scanning, closed the box, and then looked at me the way someone looks at a secured fire scene. Uncle Ray, what do you think? I lifted my head, my voice low but steady. If this is ash, then we've gathered enough to know who lit the fire. And in that moment, I understood. I was no longer the man who ran into burning houses to save others. I had become the man who finds the ignition point, the man who puts the flame out at its source. I left the house when Tacoma was wrapped in a thin layer of fog like lingering ash from an old fire. I headed out while the sky was still gray, carrying the black file bag from Station 12, the one I only used for serious rescue calls. This time it was not to save someone else. This time, I had to save myself. The downtown Tacoma branch of U.S. Bank had just opened, the front glass reflecting my hunched, slow silhouette, but still carrying the stance of a former fire captain who once led men into flames. The receptionist recognized me immediately and led me to the advisor's room, where Mr. Miller waited, the man who once held my shaking hands in 2008 to thank me after I pulled his son from a smoking supply warehouse. Ray, he said quietly, you look like you're carrying something heavy. I placed the file bag on the table. It is time to put out the fire. He opened his computer, the screen's glow lighting my face in the enclosed room, like the pale white beams of a fire engine's spotlight slicing through the night. When he asked where I wanted to begin, I simply said, begin with Evan having no more rights to my money. He typed a series of commands, eyes fixed on the screen. Within minutes, Evan's name disappeared from all joint accounts. I listened to the keys clicking, each sound sharp and metallic, like steel beams dropping in a garage when the structure is about to collapse. Quiet, but signaling something big. I handed him another set of papers. The old POA Yvonne had begged me to sign, saying it was, in case you get sick, Dad. Angela had warned me, it is a trap. Mr. Miller did not ask why. He simply stamped a red revoked across it, red so bright it felt like the Station 12 fire alarm flashing in my memory. I asked him to activate fraud alerts for any transaction above $500. Every transaction would require voice verification from me. No one would ever use my name to sign or move a single cent again. Mr. Miller nodded. Lock down like you lock your air tank before walking into a burning fuel depot. I gave him another note from Angela, where she marked a secondary account Evan had secretly used to move suspicious transfers. $5,200, $7,900, $11,400, all to Carter Construction, though I had not worked for them in over a year. Lock it, I said. Mr. Miller pressed a button. A cold beep sounded like a smoke detector the moment it senses fire behind a wall. I updated all beneficiaries. Lily, the only child who looked at me yesterday with real pain. Andrew, the nephew I could trust. And the Tacoma Fire Foundation, the fund for children of fallen firefighters. Evan's name appeared nowhere. Last came the special security layer only Angela and I knew. A long, difficult code, hard to guess, hard to remember. Each character is like another fireproof door. When Mr. Miller entered the full sequence, the system displayed, authorized, primary only. I felt my chest tighten and then slowly release. The same feeling as removing a breathing mask after a long fire call. Everything was done. Mr. Miller leaned back and looked at me with the understanding of someone who recognized all of it. The silence of a father, the wound of a man who gave his life to his child, and the image of an old fire captain now forced to save what remained of his trust. After a while, he spoke slowly, his voice low and ashen. Ray, you walked through this as carefully as stepping into a burning house, and today, you just saved yourself. I stood and shook his hand, a handshake no longer trembling, even though my heart still carried the burn marks. Leaving U.S. Bank, I saw the first sunlight of the morning catching the edge of helmet 214 in my hand. The breeze from the Foss waterway passed by, carrying the faint scent of salt. And something else I thought I had lost a long time ago, the calm of a man ready for the real fire ahead. In the late afternoon, sunlight poured across the metal roof of Station 12 in a different way, golden but heavy, like the light in those mission briefing meetings I had led for decades. I walked into the old conference room carrying the black file bag from the fire department, while Angela and Andrew were already seated beside a notary from Pierce County. The smell of old burnt plastic, leather gloves, and dried coffee stains was still there, unchanged since the day I hung up my helmet for retirement. Angela opened the folder and flipped to the first page. The document Evan had once tricked me into signing by pretending it was only a fire safety update. I looked at it for a long time. In firefighting, the enemy is not only fire, it is complacency. And I had been complacent with my own son. I put my pen down with a firm stroke. The notary's red seal hit the paper with a dry thud, like the slam of a steel fire door after an explosion. Angela handed me another set, confirming my rightful ownership, the part Evan had tried to reduce through deliberate deceit. I signed, then Andrew signed. No one said anything, but in the boy's eyes, the only honest one left in the family, I saw something Evan never had: respect. The next document transferred operational authority to Andrew. He stood, hands trembling slightly, but eyes bright. The expression of someone who understood this was not a gift, but a reminder: live straighter than the generation before. I placed my hand on his shoulder and whispered, "Integrity is the one thing that cannot be lost in any fire." Angela presented the list of every access Evan once had: system email, sub-account codes, report approvals, signing authority, everything he had quietly opened behind my back. Each item crossed out was another door locked shut. When the final signatures were completed, Angela sent the notices into the system, and Andrew changed every access code. Every entry Evan once used became a concrete wall. Finally, Angela set down the 3-page letter addressed to Carter Construction: termination of all use of my name in any contract, agreement, or verbal promise. No gaps left for them to legitimize their deception. I signed, Angela signed, and the notary stamped. The letter slid into the folder like the first fire alarm before a storm. The conference room door suddenly opened. Richard Carter stepped inside, confident posture, expensive suit, the same polished look of a man Evan had paraded in front of more than 200 people on Father's Day. But he had chosen the wrong place to project confidence. This was Station 12, where people were judged by actions, not by a $65,000 gift on a stage. Before he could speak, Angela held out the notice. "Mr. Carter, as of this moment, all contact, transactions, and agreements involving the name of Mr. Ray Lawson are terminated. You no longer have any right to use his credibility or his signature for any purpose." Richard froze. His eyes drifted to the wall, where portraits hung of the 3 firefighters I lost on duty in 2003. Maybe he realized this was not a place for posturing. I stood, looked directly at him, and spoke slowly, each word hitting him like heat, seeping through a face mask. "You are no longer tied to anything belonging to the Lawson family." The room thickened. A man who had once been publicly praised now stood there, as if the oxygen had been drained out. Richard swallowed hard, then nodded. "I understand." He turned and left without another glance. The door of Station 12 closed behind him, leaving a strange silence, like the moment after a fire is extinguished, when the heat still lingers in the air. Angela gathered the documents and looked at me, her voice steady. "First layer done. From here on, it won't be gentle, Ray." I inhaled deeply. In my chest came a familiar feeling, the feeling of a captain who had just set the perimeter before walking into a bigger fire. The real battle with Evan was still ahead. That night, Tacoma sank into the kind of stillness only people who have lost too much can recognize. I sat at the old wooden table beneath the photo of Margaret, smiling with the eyes that both Evan and I once leaned on through an entire young lifetime. The stack of documents Angela placed in front of me felt as heavy as the 32 years of firefighting I had lived through. I inhaled deeply, like the first breath, after breaking down a door into a burning house, and began rewriting my life. The old will, the one I wrote 15 years ago with all the love of a father who believed his son would keep his word, lay to the side, yellowed, and no longer fit for the man Evan had become. I put my pen down and wrote the first number. Evan would receive only $65,000, exactly the price of the Ford F-150. Tremor he gifted his father-in-law in front of more than 200 people on Father's Day, while I was handed an $18 watch with the price tag still attached. It was not revenge. It was the balance Evan himself had chosen. On the next page, I left the Fox Island cabin, the place where I taught Lily to ride a bike, where she fell asleep on my shoulder watching fireworks, where her laughter made me feel like Margaret was still alive, solely to her. She was the only one who looked at me with honest eyes that day and said, "Grandpa deserves better." I moved all $800,000 from my retirement savings to form the Lawson Firefighter Scholarship, a fund supporting the children of injured or fallen firefighters, because that money had been meant for Evan, but he chose to give his loyalty to someone else. I transferred full operational and managerial authority over my business assets to Andrew, the only one who showed integrity, not for inheritance, but out of respect. The Tacoma house where Margaret and I rebuilt after the '97 explosion, where I once carried Evan to the ER, would belong to the Tacoma Community Relief Fund to continue helping families who lost their homes to fires. Angela handed me the capacity evaluation required under Washington law to block any attempt by Evan to sue, claiming I had been manipulated or was not of sound mind. I signed each page, the notary certified it, and my family doctor would sign in the morning. Each signature felt like closing off another room in a burning house, so the flames could not spread. When all the paperwork was finished, Angela packed the files, and Andrew stood beside me in silent reverence. Only I remained in the dim light of the living room. I reached out to touch Margaret's photo, then lowered my hand to the firefighter badge that had followed me through hundreds of fires. The words slipped out so quietly they barely made a sound. I tried my best, but our son, he chose the fire. A single tear fell onto the badge, hot as embers still alive. That was the moment I understood more clearly than ever. To save anyone else, you must first pull yourself out of the danger zone. And tonight, with the final strokes of this will, I had done exactly that. That morning, Tacoma was so bright, it made the pavement look coated in hot steel. I sat in the kitchen stirring my coffee slowly, like a man who already knew the fire alarm was about to go off. Not for the city, but for his own family. At the same time, Evan was at Baby Depot, loading a cart with things for the child about to be born. A crib, a car seat, and newborn clothes. He swiped the corporate card. The machine said, "Declined." The employee looked at him with pity. He swiped again. Still declined. Evan opened the banking app. One line appeared, unauthorized. Contact the primary account holder. His face stiffened. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to have no authority. He drove straight to the office. When he opened the door, he saw Andrew sitting in the seat he had always believed, naturally, belonged to him. The employees stood up to greet Andrew without looking at Evan. Every password Evan entered was rejected by the system. Access revoked, signing rights erased. His name was wiped from all permissions. Andrew said only one sentence, enough to snap the spine of Evan's confidence. You should go talk to Uncle Ray. From that moment, my phone began ringing. The first time, Evan's voice was still steady. Dad, I think there's a system glitch. Call me back, okay? The second time, he tried to stay composed. Dad, I need to buy things for my baby. Maybe someone locked the card by mistake. Can you unlock it? I set the phone down. The vibration sounded like metal cracking in a fire, a warning that the structure was about to collapse. About an hour later, his voice began to change. No more calm, no more authority, only pure fear. Dad, what are you doing? Pick up the phone. The text followed. Dad, I'm begging you. By noon, everything inside him was burning down. His words turned sharp and desperate. Are you trying to humiliate me? Who's manipulating you? Are you not my father anymore? But anger burns out fast. By early afternoon, only a trembling breath was left on the other end of the line. Nothing like the confident man on the Father's Day stage. Dad, I can't afford my house payment. Please, don't turn your back on me. In those messages, the layers of emotion peeled off. Pleading, anger, fear, collapse. No need to list every call. It was enough to know 57 calls came in 6 hours. So many that my phone grew hot like an oxygen tank running empty. I still didn't answer, not to torture him, but so he could feel what I had carried for years, the silence of being invisible to someone you love. The 57th call came with an unfamiliar quiet. No gasping, no sobbing, just the sound of rain somewhere behind him. I picked up. On the other end, Evan said a sentence that sounded like a lost child, confessing, Dad, I don't want to lose you. I closed my eyes and let his Father's Day words replay in my head. Richard Carter is the father I never had. In front of more than 200 people, in front of me, and in front of Lily. I spoke slowly, each word pulled from ash. Evan, you told the whole city you don't have a father. I paused, long enough for him to face his own sentence. Then I ended it. I'm only helping you finish what you started. On the other end, something collapsed. Maybe Evan, maybe his illusions, maybe the life he thought he would always have. And all I heard was one thing, the sound of a door, the one he closed himself, finally locking. That afternoon, Tacoma smelled heavy with low clouds, like standing at the edge of a wildfire before the wind changes direction. I was watering Margaret's orchids when the sound of brakes screeched outside the porch. Evan was standing there, pale, hair messy, eyes red and swollen from lack of sleep. He no longer looked like the confident man live streaming in front of more than 200 people on Father's Day. He looked like someone thrown out of his own life. I opened the door without saying a word. Evan burst in with a choked voice. Why did you do this? You destroyed everything I have. I lost access, lost income, lost everything. Do you want me to die? I stepped aside. Come in. This house is not used to shouting. He walked in and sat on the sofa like a man whose back had been broken. The whole room was quiet, except for the station 12 clock, ticking like a countdown to the moment the truth would explode. For nearly 3 hours, Evans spun through emotions the way fire reacts to wind. First, he denied everything, blamed Richard, blamed circumstances, and blamed the crowded holiday for making him misspeak. Then he grew angry, shouting that I was humiliating him, destroying his career, and making him look like a failure. But that anger was just burnt paint on a wall, flaking off within minutes. He started bargaining, his voice softer, eyes pleading. Dad, unlock the accounts. I'll give everything back. I'll apologize in front of Lily. I'll cut ties with Richard. I promise. I just looked at him. In my job, you can save someone trapped in a burning house, but you cannot save someone who keeps lighting matches in their own life. When bargaining failed, Evan lowered his voice even more. He admitted he wanted Melissa's family to respect him, wanted to be seen as a man, wanted to prove his worth through things he believed money could buy. And then, when he had no words left to defend himself, he collapsed completely. Evan slumped on the couch, holding his head, his voice breaking like rotted wood under heat. "Dad, I lost everything." I was about to respond when the sound of high heels clicked on the porch. Melissa walked in as if this were a family meeting, her voice sweet, but edged with the cold sharpness I knew too well. "Daddy, he's just stressed because of the baby. Our family needs to stay united. Don't make this worse." She shifted the blame within seconds. "You're the elder. You're supposed to forgive. You're tearing this family apart." I looked straight at her, cold as high-pressure hose water. "Melissa, I did not call you here. This is not a family meeting. This is a consequence." She fell silent, for the first time unable to push responsibility onto me. I turned back to Evan. He looked up, eyes red like someone burned by smoke. I said the sentence I had held in my chest for more than half a year, each word like a step through fire. I walked into flames for 32 years, but none of those fires burned as hot as the day I watched you choose money instead of choosing your father. The words dropped through the room like a thick layer of ash. Evan lowered his face, and for the first time since he became an adult, he cried for real, not for pity, not to get something, but like someone who finally realized the only person who had ever run into fire to save him was the very person he pushed into the flames first. His tears fell onto his hands, each drop heavy, like pieces of burned wall collapsing onto the floor. And I just stood there, watching in silence. Not because I was cold, but because I knew that when a fire has already reached the foundation of a house, not everyone can stay standing. Evan chose the fire, and I chose to walk out of it. That morning, Tacoma was covered in a thin layer of fog like smoke left after a major fire, and I had just stepped onto the porch when my phone vibrated. Angela sent only 4 words: "It's happening today." I knew this was the day everything Evan had been fueling for years would be extinguished, not with water, but with the law. Around 9 o'clock in the morning at the Carter construction parking lot, Evan was standing next to the expensive pickup truck he had once gifted his father-in-law with smug pride when the office clerk from Pierce County delivered the first envelope. He tore it open irritably, but the moment his eyes scanned the words, "Revocation of all managerial authority," his face instantly changed color, shifting from red to white to ash gray. The nearby construction workers started glancing at one another, trying to suppress whispers. Evan muttered, "Must be a mistake." But even he could hear the hopelessness in his own voice. Before he could recover, a staff member from the Washington Business Registry appeared with the second envelope. Evan opened it with hands trembling like they had touched heated steel. Inside, it stated clearly that he now held only 5% ownership, with no voting rights, no management rights, and no authority to intervene in any decision. A man who once bragged about his influence and status now stood frozen like a wooden beam overheated to the point of cracking. When the clock hand inched past 9:30, Angela's legal representative arrived. She handed him the thickest envelope, stamped with the notarization Evan had avoided for months. He opened it, and the small world he had relied on for so long began to collapse. The first line of the new will appeared before his eyes. Beneficiary Evan Lawson Johnson is entitled to $65,000, a cold number matching exactly the price of the truck he had gifted his father-in-law to polish his image. His mouth released a sound caught between a laugh and a choke, before his entire body collapsed right there in the parking lot as dozens of employees stared without blinking. No authority, no reputation, no foundation. A man fell at the very place where he once stood, proudest. Just as Evan was crumbling, Richard Carter stepped out of the office. He barely opened his mouth when a court officer handed over another set of documents, thick as a criminal investigation file. Richard skimmed a few pages, his grip tightening until the paper wrinkled. It contained the full evidence of Evan's unauthorized transfers into Carter Construction, demands for repayment, civil penalties, orders to submit all books within 48 hours, and notice of investigation if concealment was detected. The chain of credibility Richard had built with my money and Evan's flattery fractured right in front of his own staff. No one sided with them. No one defended them. No one shielded them. They stood there, one on his knees, one pale-faced, like the last two victims of the fire they had helped ignite together. I was 4 blocks away, but I knew the moment had arrived. Some fires do not need to be seen to know they have been extinguished. When Evan finally looked up, his panicked eyes met the reality that the life he believed he would enjoy forever had just been publicly revoked in front of all of Carter Construction. Justice today was not shouting, not revenge. It was 3 envelopes, 3 seals, 3 truths. And for all of Tacoma, this was the moment when Evan Lawson Johnson, the man who once declared publicly that he had no father, received the one answer he could not deny. Sometimes the cruelest thing is not the fire, but the day it is extinguished. That night, Tacoma was strangely quiet, with no fire truck sirens from Station 12, no wind slamming against the windows like on every rainy night, and not even the neighbor's cat footsteps tapping across the metal roof, as everything sank into a silence thick as water, the kind that only appears after a major fire when the whole city is exhausted, and all that remains is the faint warmth rising from steaming concrete. I stood on the Foss Waterway Bridge, where I used to take Lily to watch distant whales and tell stories about Margaret, and the yellow lights stretched across the water into long streaks, like memories being pulled thin. My hand still held my phone, the same phone that had vibrated all day with 57 calls yesterday and dozens more messages dripping in this afternoon. Evan was no longer shouting. He only texted 2 words, "I'm sorry." But an apology from someone who chose money over his father is not like the apology of a child who simply made a mistake. It is like ash, light, drifting away, leaving nothing that can be held. The night breeze passed along my spine, carrying the smell of seawater mixed with the oil scent from the boats tied at the dock, and I remembered the moment Evan collapsed in the Carter construction yard, not because I felt joy, but because for the first time in many years I was no longer carrying his weight for him. A father can pull a child from a fire, but he cannot save him from the consequences of lighting it himself. I rested my hand on the railing, thinking of Margaret's eyes in the photo on my desk, the eyes that taught me to keep my heart soft even when the world hardened, and I whispered into the empty air, "Honey, I kept my promise to you. I didn't let anyone hurt this family again, not even our own son." The water below rippled softly, glowing in specks like falling embers, and I did not know where Evan was at that moment. In his car, at Melissa's door, or wandering the streets he once bragged about because everyone knows who the son of Captain Lawson is. I only knew one thing: silence was also an answer. Close to midnight, Andrew called with a voice low and tired, yet responsible. "Uncle Ray, everything at the company is settled. Angela is reviewing the books. Tomorrow morning we'll submit the rest." I smiled gently, a smile I could not remember the last time I had, and said, "Thank you, Andrew." He hesitated for a moment before saying the one sentence that softened my chest like the water in front of me. "Uncle, you haven't lost everything. You still have us." I could not reply and simply looked at the water again as the night breeze eased and carried the scent of a new day. Tonight, no one screamed my name. No one demanded money. No one pressured me to sign anything. There was only me, a man who had walked through fire his whole life, standing in the peace he had fought to reclaim. As I left the bridge, I looked down one last time. The Foss waterway was no longer rushing like when I arrived, but was calm and faint, like the old tablecloth Margaret used whenever she wanted us to eat slower and talk longer, and I touched the cold iron railing and whispered, "Justice isn't an explosion. It's this water, flat, quiet, but unstoppable." That night, for the first time after a long road, my heart felt as still as the water.